We all have dreams. Dreams to do more, dreams of a better job, dreams of a better life. And sometimes those dreams remain exactly that, dreams. Today, millennials are under a strong pressure to live up to society's ideal of a self-made person. These millennials, despite being a very optimistic generation, being described as the most entrepreneurial generation ever, face a far tougher world. A world in which getting the perfect job is difficult. Getting a job in itself is a job. And to just start to look for a job, often we start with our support system, the people around us, the family, and the friends that we have. This support system is great. I mean, it's made up of people who have the same beliefs as us, people who share the same aspirations, people who cheer us on. Unfortunately, it comes with its own disadvantages. This group of people who think like us create an echo chamber, a chamber in which we think the same and act the same. We think in a manner as if we're clones or zombies. As a child, I aspired to be a journalist. Everybody would be glued to their TV screens for the 7 o'clock news. You know, everybody would hang on to the newscasters' every word. For me, what was most interesting was the news. It was a glimpse into another world, into another culture, into other people. Once a year, my mother would sit me and my cousins down and ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? How many of you got that question as kids? Practically everybody. The thing is, in my home, where I come from, you have to be prepared to answer these questions from anybody, from any adult. It could be a distant relative. Any random adult would ask you this question, and you had to be prepared with an answer. Because if you're not prepared, you risk being assumed to be without ambition or goals, and nobody wants that. And when my mother asked me this question, I automatically would say that I want to be a journalist. But it wouldn't end there. You had to say why you want to be a journalist. You had to think about your answer. And she'd ask, so why do you want to be a journalist? Because it opens up new worlds, and I'm very interested in the news. And it would go on to, what is it that you need to be a journalist? Of course, after quite a bit of research, say English grammar, literature, history. This is how it was. You had to be very prepared for every single answer, and this was nurtured in us from a very young age. Moving on, I succeeded in getting into journalism school at the University of Nairobi. During this time, I interned in a government agency as a feature writer and also had the opportunity of starring in a local television sitcom as a newscaster. That's the closest I actually got to broadcasting. Being exposed to this situation, I realized that journalism was too much of a cutthroat industry. I could not live up to it. There were just too many journalists. It was an uphill struggle trying to get published. So therefore, it was time to look for a different career path. I went out back to the drawing board and looked for something else. 3 weeks later, 2 interviews later, I got propelled into a new career as a qualitative researcher. This was a new area for me. I had to work shadow to be able to understand how the job worked, and this is very evident in millennials today. Being in this position also resonated with sayings, one of my mother's many sayings. She said, just because you're born in one corner of the world, it doesn't mean that you need to be loyal to that corner. Just because I'd started my path in journalism did not mean that I needed to stick to it. This also resonates with millennials today, where job hopping is normal and a safe job or a safe career is a little bit old-fashioned, and it's all about career exploration rather than climbing the ladder. I also took this saying literally, and in 2011 I moved to Sweden. Sweden was a whole new environment for me. I thought I would be able to apply the same tactics that I had in Kenya. I put out applications as I did before, listing organizations that I wanted to work for. But it turned out to be much tougher. 2 months into my arrival, I was called for a job interview. I didn't nail it, didn't nail the one after or the one after that. Something was terribly wrong. I went back to my support group, looking for support, trying to find out what it is that I'm doing wrong. The one thing that the employment agency did for me, and I guess a lot of foreigners sort of resonate with this, that Albert Förmedlingen gave me a job coach. That was the one great thing they did for me. With this job coach, we were able to have mock interviews together, and there I was able to sort of understand what it is that I was doing wrong and different. As a millennial transitioning from one part of the world to another, I had to be able to understand my environment. I had to be able to form myself to fit into the environment. This is one thing that a lot of people struggle with today. Being in Sweden also made me realize something that hadn't quite occurred to me before. For the first time, I was a minority. For the first time, I was different. This was a new feeling for me. I remember going for one job interview, and the interviewer actually asked me whether Krista was my real name, or had I given it to myself upon arrival in Sweden to be more relatable. And in another inquiry, the manager of an international Swedish company said he had never thought a foreigner would actually apply for the job, even though it clearly stated that it required English speakers, strict English speakers. As a minority, I realized I could turn this into a strength. Being different was actually a good thing. Being different, you already garner a lot of attention without really working hard. Being different, you already have a head start in meeting people. You don't have to work hard, and it's really up to you to see what you can do with that situation. Today, I'm very fortunate to have one of the best jobs I could say I have to date. As mentioned earlier, I work with the United Nations Refugee Agency, leading an information campaign on refugees from the Horn of Africa coming to Europe via the Mediterranean. It's been very humbling to see the amount of public support this has garnered. By a show of hands, how many of you participated in the Refugees Welcome campaign? And keeping your hands up, how many of you have actually ever interacted with a refugee on a personal basis, not in a group setup? It's very easy to think that you have a grip of the situation. It's in the news all the time, after all. There are all these statistics running around. But until you actually put yourself out there and meet someone different and talk and understand their experiences, then that is when you have a full picture. You have a full picture understanding nobody desires to be a refugee, and anybody can be a refugee. The poet Rilke Maria says, "I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world." For me, this resonates a lot with my life in terms of being daring enough to widen my circles to accommodate more of the world, to accommodate more of different people, to accommodate more of different ideas. He goes on to say, "I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it." As much as you open up to your experiences, as unusual as they may be, see it as a journey. When you meet someone, don't meet them with a certain goal. Meet them to just take in their experiences. So therefore, should you even surround yourself with different people? I mean, you already have a great social circle around you. Why do you need to do that? And that already works quite well for you. The first thing is, other than what I feel is quite obvious, expanding your expectations and ideals of the world, is that meeting new people expands your level of empathy. Being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Being able to understand other people's experiences. The second thing is, you might ask, but what is in it for me? First and foremost, being empathetic enables you to be able to understand the personality you reflect when you communicate with people. You'd be able to understand what people perceive of you when you communicate with them. The second thing is, how do you even go about to surrounding yourself with other people? You need to know that you want to. You need to be fully aware of your weaknesses and your biases and be honest about them. After that, you need to have a level of inquisitiveness. You need to have an insatiable curiosity for strangers. Talking to the mailman for 5 minutes doesn't quite cut it. You need to be able to fully engage with someone. We're often afraid of interacting with people because you think that, well, we don't have anything in common. What are we going to talk about? I think the fact that you have nothing in common then gives you so much to talk about. And with this, if you feel that if you regard other people as strange rather than different, then you're only just living within your box. And with this box, you're missing out on opportunities. But remember this. With these opportunities, often that is when your dreams can be realities. Thank you.